For 6 years, a 20-minute conversation between a prime minister and a prince remained shrouded in the kind of mystery that fuels royal speculation. The meeting, a private, aid-free encounter between Boris Johnson and Prince Harry at London's Docklands in January 2020, was reported at the time as little more than a routine catch-up on the sidelines of a UK-Africa investment summit. The world knew they had met. What the world did not know was that the man who had just delivered Brexit was, in that moment, being asked to perform what would prove to be an equally impossible task: persuading a reluctant prince to remain within the royal fold. Now, with the publication of Johnson's memoir Unleashed and its serialization in the Daily Mail in March 2026, the full, remarkable truth of that encounter has finally emerged. It reveals a fascinating, almost farcical footnote to the saga of Megxit, a last-ditch intervention that speaks volumes about the desperation, the misjudgment, and the ultimately unstoppable forces that drove Prince Harry and Meghan Markle to leave Britain behind. To understand why Boris Johnson was called upon to play an unlikely role in royal affairs, one must first understand the events that immediately preceded his intervention. By January 2020, the House of Windsor was in open crisis. On January 8th, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had announced via Instagram their intention to step back as senior royals, seeking financial independence and a future split between the United Kingdom and North America. It was a declaration that caught Buckingham Palace off guard and sent shockwaves through the monarchy. The response was swift. The late Queen, then 93, summoned her heirs to a crisis meeting at her Sandringham estate in Norfolk. Dubbed the Sandringham Summit by the press, the gathering on January 13, 2020, brought together the Queen, Prince Charles, Prince William, and Prince Harry in an attempt to resolve what was fast becoming the most significant royal rift since the abdication crisis. Meghan, then in Canada with 8-month-old Archie, was to join by phone. The summit was held in the Long Library at Sandringham, a room that in happier times had been where the young princes took tea with their grandmother. Now it was the site of a tense 90-minute showdown. By all accounts, the atmosphere was one of profound unease. The Daily Mail's royal correspondent, Richard Kay, wrote at the time, "Not since the dark days over Diana has there been such a sense of dread and unhappiness shrouding the royal family." Yet accounts of what actually transpired behind those closed doors have varied dramatically. Initial reports suggested a calm, measured discussion, but Harry's own subsequent recollections in his 2023 memoir Spare and the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan painted a far more explosive picture. He claimed his brother, Prince William, screamed and shouted at him, leaving him terrified. He alleged that his father, now King Charles III, said things that just simply weren't true. Most controversially, Harry accused the Queen's private secretary, Sir Edward Young, whom he nicknamed the Bee, of having fixed the outcome in advance. According to Harry, when he asked to see draft statements outlining alternative options for their departure, Sir Edward claimed his printer had gone on the blink, a convenient excuse Harry later exposed as false when he found the same printer working perfectly moments later. In other words, the fix was in this whole time? This summit was just for show? Harry wrote in Spare. The meeting left him feeling cornered and betrayed. Less than a week later, with the wounds from Sandringham still raw, someone decided that a different kind of intervention was required. Someone decided that perhaps a man famous for his bluster, his bonhomie, and his ability to persuade the British public to take a leap into the unknown might just succeed where family had failed. Watch the clip from Good Morning Britain above, where the hosts discuss the private meeting between Boris Johnson and Prince Harry and what was said in that 20-minute conversation.
To you, Liz. I mean, this is a fascinating insight, isn't it? What more can you tell us about this intervention?
Good morning, Sean. Yes, absolutely fascinating, this. The claims have been published in a memoir which is due to come out on the 10th of October, Mr. Johnson's memoir called Unleashed. And there are extracts which are published in the Mail today. Now, we understand that in January 2020, both Buckingham Palace and Number 10 Downing Street spoke to Mr. Johnson and said he might be able to convince Prince Harry to stay in the UK rather than leaving his royal duties. Now, we understand that the meeting between Boris Johnson and Prince Harry took place at the Docklands in London at a UK-Africa investment summit. And the former Prime Minister writes, "There was a ridiculous business where they made me try to persuade Harry to stay, kind of manly pep talk, totally hopeless." Now, we know that this meeting took around 20 minutes and apparently there were no aides. This was in private. But the following day, Prince Harry did fly out to Canada to be with his wife Meghan and their son Archie. And of course, the rest is history. Royal experts think that this happened following a fraught meeting between Prince Harry and his grandmother, the Queen, his father, Charles, and of course his older brother, William, at Sandringham.
This meeting, the Sandringham Summit, there was a lot of bad blood that Harry took away from that. And less than a week later, somebody tapped the Prime Minister on the shoulder and said, well, actually, look, could you please just try and see if you can rope Harry into staying? So whoever that was not only thought that it was a possibility, but cared so much about trying to get Harry and Meghan to stay in Britain that they were willing to potentially put the Prime Minister's reputation on the line.
Well, this is quite the revelation, and there are set to be many, many more in the run-up to the publication of Boris Johnson's memoir.
The UK-Africa Investment Summit, held in London's Docklands on January 20th, 2020, was intended to showcase post-Brexit Britain's commitment to global partnerships. For Prince Harry, it represented one of his final official engagements as a working royal. The night before, he had delivered an emotional speech at a Sentabale charity dinner, speaking not as a prince or a duke, but as Harry, and revealing with great sadness that he had been left with no other option but to step away. It was a speech laden with finality. Yet, according to Johnson's newly published account, forces behind the scenes were not ready to give up. In his memoir, Johnson describes being approached by both Buckingham Palace and Number 10 Downing Street with a peculiar request. There was, he writes, a ridiculous business where they made me try to persuade Harry to stay. The aim was to deliver what Johnson himself wryly calls a manly pep talk, a final avuncular appeal from one old Etonian to another, in the hope that the Prime Minister's influence might sway the prince. The meeting took place in the middle of the morning in a cleared meeting room with no aides present. Johnson, who had been mayor of London when Harry led the Invictus Games and foreign secretary when Meghan attended an event on female education, had formed a genuine admiration for the couple. He saw them as a national asset, people whose presence added zing to any room and whose work had tangible value for UK PLC. According to a friend cited by the Daily Mail, Johnson praised Harry's work with the Invictus Games and Meghan's advocacy for girls' education, trying to make the case that their departure would be a real loss to the country. Johnson's own recollection is characteristically self-deprecating. He writes of fixing Prince Harry with what I hoped was a look of manly frankness and offering career advice in an avuncular tone. I honestly think it's a pity, he recalls saying. I think there is so much good you can do here, so many good causes. Why not stick around? Prince Harry, by Johnson's account, was basically a polite and forbearing fellow who heard him out without the slightest sign of impatience. But it was immediately clear that the Prime Minister's words were falling on deaf ears. Harry, Johnson concluded, was unpersuadable by that point. The man who had succeeded in delivering Brexit, who had campaigned on a promise to take back control, could not convince the prince to remain. I may have delivered Brexit, but I couldn't avert Megxit. The meeting lasted approximately 20 minutes. By the following day, Prince Harry had flown to Canada to reunite with Meghan and Archie, leaving behind the life he had known and beginning the journey that would eventually take the family to Montecito, California. The manly pep talk had been, in Johnson's own words, totally hopeless. For years, the true nature of that Docklands meeting remained hidden. At the time, it was reported simply as a private conversation between the Prime Minister and the Prince, a routine diplomatic engagement with no particular significance. Neither Johnson nor Harry spoke publicly about what had been discussed. The official line was that they had met to discuss UK-Africa relations, with Harry's long-standing ties to the continent providing a natural point of connection. But the publication of Unleashed in October 2024 and its serialization in the Daily Mail in March 2026 changed everything. For the first time, Johnson laid bare the full, unvarnished truth that he had been drafted in as an unlikely mediator, tasked with a mission that was doomed from the start. His account provides a rare, intimate glimpse into the final days before the Sussexes' departure, revealing the lengths to which both the palace and Downing Street were willing to go to keep them in Britain. The revelation has been met with a mixture of amusement and astonishment. Royal experts have noted that it adds an unexpected overlap between the political and royal worlds to the Megxit saga. It also raises intriguing questions about who precisely made the request. Johnson writes vaguely of being approached by Buckingham Palace and Number 10 Downing Street, but he does not specify individuals. Whoever it was, Johnson notes, not only thought that it was a possibility, but cared so much about trying to get Harry and Meghan to stay in Britain that they were willing to potentially put the Prime Minister's reputation on the line. Not everyone, however, accepts Johnson's version of events. Sources close to Buckingham Palace have since disputed his account, telling The Telegraph that no formal request was made for the Prime Minister to intervene. These unnamed sources suggest that while meetings were held to navigate the Sussexes' departure, Johnson was never specifically asked to try to change Harry's mind. The contradiction highlights the enduring opacity of royal affairs, even 6 years on, even with memoirs and documentaries and Netflix series. The full truth remains contested. Yet for Johnson, the significance of his failed intervention has only grown with time. In his Daily Mail column, written to coincide with the serialization, he reflects on the conversation with the benefit of hindsight and issues a surprising new invitation. Writing in March 2026, Johnson returns to that meeting with a perspective shaped by 6 years of subsequent history. Both he and Prince Harry, he notes, have spectacularly fallen out with their respective organizations. Johnson left Downing Street in disgrace, while Harry has built a new life in California, far from the institutional constraints of the monarchy. But Johnson's message to the couple is not one of recrimination. In fact, he does something quite unexpected. He concedes that Harry was right back then to ignore him, and why they were right to go to America, Johnson writes. He points to Meghan's entrepreneurial success, noting with apparent admiration that she has sold not far short of 1 million pots of jam, retailing at $42, 31 pounds, for a fruit spread box. He contrasts this with his own failed attempts at jam making, offering a rare moment of self-deprecating humor. Yet for all his praise of American opportunity, Johnson's underlying plea is unmistakable. There is absolutely nowhere lovelier than England in the spring, he writes. The blossom is already out here in Oxfordshire. The grass has had its first mow. A pair of ducks has just winged its way past my window. Isn't it time for this pair of royal ducks to wing their way home? The invitation is extended with characteristic Johnsonian flourish. He urges Harry and Meghan to come back, the pair of you, with your heads held high. He suggests that they would be welcomed, that family rifts can be mended, that their return would be an important signal, in grim times, of confidence in this country. He even offers a political rationale, suggesting that their return could help stem the Starmer hemorrhage of talent leaving Britain under the Labour government. Whether the invitation will be accepted is, of course, another matter. The couple have made no public response, and their lives in Montecito appear settled. But Johnson's intervention, both the original failed pep talk and this new public appeal, serves as a remarkable bookend to a story that has captivated the world for more than half a decade. What emerges from Johnson's account is a story of unintended ironies. The prime minister who championed sovereignty and independence found himself trying to persuade a prince to surrender his. The man who built a political career on breaking with established institutions was asked to defend one of the oldest institutions in the world. And the manly pep talk, that most quintessentially Johnsonian form of persuasion, proved utterly powerless against a man who had already made up his mind. But perhaps the most striking aspect of the revelation is simply this. For 6 years, the truth of that conversation remained hidden. It was a secret carried by two men, a prime minister and a prince, who each had their reasons for keeping it. Johnson, by finally revealing it, has offered the public a rare glimpse into the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that accompanied the most significant royal departure in generations. The meeting was, in the end, a failure. Harry left for Canada the following day, and the Sussexes have since built a new life on the other side of the Atlantic. Yet the revelation of Johnson's intervention adds a poignant coda to the Megxit saga, a reminder that even as the couple were walking out the door, there were those who desperately wanted them to stay. That they did not, despite appeals from a prime minister, speaks to the depth of their conviction and the irreparable nature of the rift that had opened up within the House of Windsor. As Johnson himself concludes, with characteristic ambivalence, there is no disgrace in going to America, giving it your best shot, and then jacking it in. Whether Harry and Meghan ever take his advice to return, the story of the manly pep talk will stand as a fascinating footnote to one of the most dramatic royal episodes of the 21st century, finally told after 6 years of silence in full.